Tuesday. Feels like
Tuesday.
a Friday, baby.
All right.
Don't know why it feels like a Monday. What is up, everybody? And welcome to the DNVR Nuggets podcast. As always, by DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top-rated sportsbook app. Look at that graphic right there, fellas. 10 days, and we will be in Serbia. I'm hopeful we can finalize some of these plans. We've already got some great stuff lined up. A lot of people don't quite know what this trip is. Maybe it's because we don't quite know what this trip is. We've had ideas, we've been putting it together, but now that it is actually real, starting to put the blocks in place and see what's coming through. I can't wait to share with you. I'm going to tell you right now, some pretty big name interviews.
Really excited. We are not just hitting the ground and spreading out and partying. We've got a content plan. It's a good one.
Well, first of all, yes, we are. We did not know that the first day we arrive in Serbia is also Beer Fest.
Literally the first thing we'll be doing is partying. But we are going to get to work, and we have a good plan. And I think you guys will be excited by what we try to bring in here.
I'm extremely excited for it. We've met some incredible people already along the way as we're starting to put this together, and it's just going to be incredible. And I'm telling you, if you are from Serbia, you need to contact us. Let us know. I think that Saturday night, there'll be opportunities for us to meet up with different people throughout the trip. But Saturday night or afternoon, evening, night will probably be the day where we put together, hey, this place, this time, here's where we're going to meet up. Anybody that wants to come and hang out with us all night long, we're going to be available to you doing all kinds of good stuff. So Saturday, you want to put it in your books. What is that going to be, the 20th? August 20th, that'll be the day. And like I said, stay tuned to the show because we are going to have some big announcements coming up as we reveal our plans for this trip. Today's show, Vogt.
Yo.
You and I haven't done a two-man game in a long time.
It makes me think of Denver Stiffs, really.
Since Denver Stiffs.
Wow. That's probably not right, but it feels like it's
That was a really long time ago. I don't think it was that. It was way back then. But I'm excited for this one. We are doing a mailbag in segments 2 and 3, and we got some great questions. Such a long list that I'm not sure we're going to get to all of them, but we got some fantastic ones, including if you know how you want to get on the show, Vogt. You know how you know the way you could just play to your audience. You send in a Nathan Fielder question.
I knew Adam was going to jump all over that one when it came in.
Still love the show. Still all in. Can't wait to somehow do a Nathan Fielder bit for the Denver Nuggets. But before we get to that, Vogt, we have to get to our top story today.
That's right.
Yesterday, or maybe it was 2 days ago on a podcast, Jamal Murray hops on. Let me get my notes here. He hops on with Kaz Brown, a former Kentucky Wildcat volleyball player, friend of Jamal Murray. And he does, a short interview, has a little bit of interesting stuff. Who pays for meals on the road? He says the coaching staff, which is weird to me. I do think that I don't want to overread into these meaningless answers, but that one did stick out to me.
He did say because they have the team credit card.
Jamal Murray has $200 million.
That's a good point. It's probably bigger than the credit line, actually.
What are we doing here? Pick up the tab, it's important here to go out. It makes me think, actually, again, I don't want to overanalyze this. Players, we're not really analyzing this. It's August. We're reaching. But it does remind me of Phil Jackson. I know one time, I think it was in 2006 or 7 or something in there. He told Kobe, hey, man, you need to take the team out sometime. You're the team's leader and you've never done a thing for him. And so he took them out to dinner. Except for he sat separately.
Unbelievable.
The whole team has a table together, then he was off in the corner, and it was this whole thing. So anyway, it makes me think hey, maybe the Nuggets haven't always had the vet that's hey, Nikola.
Hey, it's actually your turn.
I saw that you signed a deal worth almost $300 million. I saw that you did that. Could you take the team out to a nice steak dinner? Marcus Howard over here doesn't have any money. He's eating at Taco Bell just to save.
Facu got everyone beats for Christmas. I mean, you can do something.
That's right. Can you just do a little meal here? Jamal, Michael Porter, how about that? Michael Porter, I know you haven't played a lot of games, but you do make more money than everyone but two guys. Let's go here. So I thought that, but again, don't want to overanalyze this. He gave a shout out to PJ Dozier, which I thought was really cool, and talked about wanting to bring him back, which warms my heart. Also makes me think another one of his teammates is wait, for who?
For who though?
Are you talking about
rosters?
It's my fault. Am I here? No, I'm just kidding. Again, totally joking. But the most important thing, and I mean this sincerely, he gives this quote. He was asked about Denver, and he says, "It's my home, and I don't plan on leaving." And he said it in Jamal Murray way. He didn't say that as in a look at the camera, smile, give this.
Right.
He almost just said it real quick. He said, "It's my home, and I don't plan on leaving." Talking about why he likes it this much. I don't think players. Oh no, poor Jokic just left.
Really bad
That's a really bad omen.
He's okay.
He's okay. He's sleeping. That's the line I tell my kids every time they catch a frog and put it in a thing, and then I don't know till the next day. I'm like, oh, he's just sleeping. I'm just going to put it outside, but please stop putting frogs into a little cup. Yeah. It got really dark. I'm telling you, they kill 8 frogs a week. My daughters, they just keep capturing them and putting them in jars. So I've never heard Jamal say this before.
Right.
And it's weird because we make these assumptions. And I know people have gotten mad at me in the past when I said, I would not be surprised if Nikola retired after this, after this contract, which is in 5-6 years. And some people have said, Adam's the only one reporting this. I'm not reporting it. I'm just saying, look, Tim Conley has come out and said he wonders the same thing. When Tim Conley was here, he was like, I ask him all the time, and he tells me when it stops being fun. I don't know what Jokic's long-term plan is, but Jamal is a weird one because like Jokic, where I make this I wouldn't be surprised, I've always thought with Jamal, I wouldn't be surprised if he played out this contract. And I never pictured him as a 20-year Denver Nugget. But when he says a statement like that, it was the first time I ever go, Jamal's 25. What if he spends a whole decade in Denver?
And we almost forget to even ask that question because it's Jokic first, and so there are so many ways in which Jamal gets taken for granted, I think, and this is one of them, in that the way he has slid into being an integral part of not just the team's success, but the team's identity. Jamal has to be here for this to be this era, this iteration of the Nuggets. And I think maybe Toronto, just because of the I
always thought that
in the back of the mind, but until that was ever
like how Tatum's going to wind up in the Lakers eventually.
That will happen.
But
until something like that lined up, or there are rumors, it's just something you never even really think about. You take Jamal's presence for granted that he'll continue to be here, and it was one of the big wake up calls of last season, of course, not having him.
Right, and I think it's cool. There's scenarios whereby maybe Jokic is on the fence about it, and even in his mind, he's like, I'll retire. And then Jamal's like, hey, man, no, we're still on the top of our game. We're coming off our 3rd straight championship. What are you doing? Let's keep running it, And then there's, you think about, well, what if Jamal, we picture Jokic, Nugget for life and whatever. What if Jamal has another era beyond Jokic, a la Kobe and Shaq, Kobe and Power, something like that. So I just thought it was cool. But more than anything, we never know what players really think of a city, of an organization, what they want of their careers. And him coming out and say it, I just thought was so cool. And it made me, in a weird way and in a small way, it made me think about him almost differently. As
sure,
he's always been a cornerstone of this organization, but maybe even more so than I had thought.
Yeah, more of whatever it is we're trying to articulate with Mr. Nugget. There's some of that in Jamal. More so, we almost talk about the talent first, but this is a real nice fit in Denver.
It endears him to me even more. And it's funny because oftentimes with these guys, and we're going to run into this with Bones Highland, I think. We ran into it with Jokic to a certain extent and Michael Porter to a big extent, and now with Jamal. And that is, I first met Jamal, he was 19 years old, and he was very much a 19-year-old. And there were parts of him when you're coming through that me, as a 30, at the time 33-year-old guy or something, I'd look at and I'd be like, wow, immature or just young or this or that, and almost in some ways distance it. There's some players that I feel like Paul Millsap's my age, so we call him dad and stuff, but I'm I'm an old guy too now relative to these youngins. Connect with those guys or this or that. Jamal was almost the first one where I was just like, man, he's a different generation than me.
Right,
he just feels younger. And now he's grown up. He's 25 years old. He's gone through a lot. I do feel like there's a lot of maturity to him, and it's kind of funny in this weird way where I almost feel like we're halfway through the Jamal experience, but maybe we really are just at the beginning of the Jamal Murray experience, and that's exciting. And then lastly on this point, it's so uncommon in today's NBA for a player to stick that long. It's even more uncommon for 2 players to stick. Who are the guys that are long tenured right now with their teams? Damian Lillard, extremely high profile. Who else are we talking about right now? Giannis, basically, he's 9 years. Giannis and Milwaukee are, feel like guys that have been through it all. But even he's we don't think of him. He has so much more of his career ahead of him. Who else are guys that you're yeah, that was a lifer?
Yeah, that's a good point, man.
You start to get to Devin Booker, who's the same as Jamal.
He's probably the one. Yeah.
Jokic, who's 7-8 years now. But there's not that many guys that you look at and say they were there the whole time. Could Jamal and Jokic, Dame sets a new trend of being a player that just said, no, I'm going to not run from the grind. I'm going to be here. It would be really cool if Jokic and Jamal were the guys that were just in Denver for 12, 13 years.
I've wondered aloud if that's one of the biggest changes we're going to see in this next generation of players. I mean, we've seen Giannis walk the walk, Jokic now walk the walk. Knock on wood, but what are we talking? He will.
Right.
You know, John Moran has already said stuff about wanting to be in Memphis. I think we're starting to see the appeal of that resonate with this next generation. And Jamal could be one of those guys. And I don't know if Jokic really thinks this way. And I don't know about Jamal either. But there's a real path to them cementing themselves as the most important Denver Nuggets.
Well, I want to get to that second part here in just a second.
Not just Jokic, but Jamal, too.
But here's another thing here's what's funny about how we tell stories and whether it's right or wrong. But sometimes I think about if this never doesn't work out for me, writing about players and doing podcasting, maybe I would try to work for an agency or something and just be like, look, you guys are missing the forest for the trees here. Let me explain how this comes off to a fan or this or that. One of the things I was thinking about in terms of like narrative, Stockton and Malone get elevated to a level that, say, Peyton and Kemp do not, or some of these other duos that had a short part of why is because they spent years together, decades together, and even though they didn't win, they get elevated into this. Yes, but we know Stockton and Malone, and I wonder how many other duos do you have? Kobe and Shaq won championships, but a short window. But how many duos do you have that reach that level? And I wonder, could Murray and Jokic be this era Stockton and Malone? Not in wins, losses. I hope they win one, so I don't want them to be in that way. But can they be in that they just talk about what was the best duo? Everybody talks about best player, who's the best of this generation, whatever. What if it was, but the best duo was Murray and Jokic? Extremely on the table.
I love that. Like, you can't mention one without mentioning the other. And that was the thing about the bubble run and then subsequently the injury. As Jokic got better and better and better, their chances still felt ultimately futile.
Right.
You realized how essential Jamal was to whatever this team's success is. And I wonder if Jamal recognizes that, but there is a golden opportunity to stay here the whole time, to be Jokic's partner, not Robin, but partner in lifting Denver into a new era of basketball, a new reputation league-wide. And that is something that can be achieved here in a way that can't be if he goes elsewhere and starts over.
I think you have to win to have that kind of longevity. I mean, the thing about Stockton and Malone is they were always in it. They were always in the conversation.
Right.
And enough so that you didn't feel like, hey, the formula's wrong. And I think even to this day, nobody looks at Stockton and Malone and said, yeah, they just couldn't win together. It's that they ran into Michael at like the peak of, his team powers at least. And obviously Denver has to win and I think probably win a championship. But there is this, that's what you want. A team that is in the conversation for a decade plus.
Right.
And you just look at it every single year and you could be like, who are the top 4 teams? Well, you can pencil in the Utah Jazz and then it was the Bulls and then it was the Rockets that year like this or that. But it was always if it was that way, and we talked about the entire 2020s about who are the best teams. Well, it was always the Nuggets.
Right.
And then for a while it was the Warriors. For a while it was whatever. And for a while it was this. I just think that would be an incredible legacy, especially if you attach at least one championship to it.
Well, the fact that the regular success has kind of been there. When together, they've won consistently over the years as much as any team. And really,
they haven't won the 55 plus though, because that's the one thing about even those teams, they were 60-win teams.
But every year they were in the running for home court. Every single season, in a way that even the best teams haven't always been. And so if that now, you start seeing that in the playoffs, consistent, deep runs, the cherries on top, the finals, maybe it is a thing where you fast forward and you get the old heads who are going, man, 2020s, the Denver Nuggets, you just did not want to run into those guys on any night.
So Murray comes over in 2016. Since 2016, we'll start there. What have been the best duos in the NBA? And here's the thing.
Okay.
It can't be best player who had a, whatever. And it can't be team. I'm thinking the Warriors. To me, Draymond and Steph are the duo, but they're not thought of as a duo.
Right.
So who are the best
tough.
duos?
Since they got in the league? Together? Oh, man.
I think that you would probably say LeBron and Kyrie, but I feel like that one even is pushing it. LeBron was significantly better, and they never felt like they weren't friends, so they weren't. You know what I mean? They weren't.
But that's still
worked.
in there. That you would.
It
I think you would
still
throw them
works.
in there.
Yeah,
That's how you thought
works.
of the Cavs. It was not a team.
But, who else? Let's see. Let's go through some teams
there
here.
There are going to be some
the Celtics. I mean, they have Tatum and Brown, kind of, but even again, doesn't feel like a tandem that's working together. Just two good players together.
But by default, they might slide in. There was Mitchell and Gobert, but again, it didn't work out. They didn't like each other.
Also, Denver beat them, so by nature they go above. I mean, you do have James Harden and Joel Embiid, but that's just feels like this is the first real year. But maybe that becomes the great duo
Dame and CJ? I mean, that was so lopsided.
I think of them high on the list, but no way. Like, come on. They're not. Yeah, they're not. But they're also just not good, and they don't work together the way Murray and Jokic do.
Right.
The chat giving us any ideas here? Chicago. Does Chicago have anybody? Not really.
Lots of like Steph, Clay, and probably Draymond.
It's a trio. And again, at that point, you're just starting to get to a great team. Again, this is not a quantifiable topic. This is more just like a, I'm just trying to say what it is.
Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid.
And then Kawhi and Paul George.
Ben Simmons
has a chance.
It has a chance to be as well, for sure.
George,
Yep. And then you're right that Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid are up there. They're probably one of the top ones.
It's the funny thing about it.
I keep going through. Atlanta doesn't really have a 1-2 or has had one. Miami doesn't really have one. Charlotte hasn't. Memphis, New Orleans, Houston, San Antonio, Dallas. Yeah, I don't think there's been a 1-2 punch of that nature that over the stretch. There really hasn't. I mean, actually, I have KD and Westbrook also. And this is, I think they only had 1 year, 2016, because the next year, whatever, but that was a duo, right? And it didn't work out. But I do think that you will look back at that as a sort of duo.
And then there's the LeBron AD bubble run.
LeBron AD counts even, but it was like 1 year of success. I don't know if we're going to look back at the LeBron AD duo.
But they were a duo.
But are we going to look back at it and talk about it as a duo, or is it LeBron's stint in LA?
They did win a title together.
I know it did. LeBron won a title with Kyrie. LeBron won a title with Wade. LeBron was definitely a duo.
This is really funny because the immediate reaction juxtaposed with how this has aged. Is he the best big of all time? Was he even part of the equation?
I'm just saying, like, yes, they were a duo, but it's a little bit different. My point remains that when we look back at this era, there's an opening for greatest duo of the era.
That's a great point.
And not only is there an opening, I think there's a great chance that they can end up achieving it.
Wow, that got really exciting. Look at that.
Isn't that good?
I love that. I love and cementing the connection to, like, not that he's a Denver guy, but it's not just this Serbian thing. Like, it's Jokic and Jamal. It was Denver and Serbia. It wasn't just the Jokic ride all the way through.
Correct.
Right? And so I think there's a real chance for that, especially because, Jokic could win Finals MVP and people would still say he wasn't the best player on his own team. So it's all possible.
Jamal Murray, Nugget for life, baby.
I hope so.
I hope so too, man. That would be great. Let's take a quick break, an earlier break than usual. On the other side, I wanted to go into this Nets situation just real quickly before we get to our great mailbag questions. The Nets, interesting. I don't care about the Nets and most of their turmoil, but this one, a little interesting to me.
Interesting. You know what's interesting? The Breck Beer Locator. It's this sick tool. You tell it what kind of Breck brew you want, where you live, and it tells you where you can get it. Test that out and use the Avalanche Amber Ale to test it out because it's the classic Breck brew. It's a beer for champions, and it is available wherever the Breck Beer Locator tells you it is, or you can get it here at the bar when we're open, at the Breck Brew headquarters, at grocery stores, convenience stores, liquor stores, all over the place. Check them out. One of the best ways to support DNVR is by supporting our friends, and that Breckenridge Brewery, well, they're more than our friends. They're the official beer of DNVR. So shout out Breck. DraftKings Sportsbook is America's top-rated sportsbook, and right now you can get in on the hottest sports action for your shot at cold, hard cash. Bet on your favorite sports all summer long. Gear up for football season right now. New customers can get a risk-free bet up to $1,000. Just make your first bet up to $1,000, and if it doesn't hit, you get another shot at that big win. New customer or not, whether your team's good or not, you can have fun with sports this summer thanks to same-game parlays, spreads, money lines, over-unders, props. So many ways to play, so many ways to get skin in the game and win when you're playing with DraftKings Sportsbook. Safe, secure, reliable. Download it. Use promo code DNVR. It must be 21 or older. Colorado only. New customers only. Minimum $5 deposit. Risk-free bet paid out in the form of non-withdrawable free bet token. Max $1,000. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-522-4700.
All right, back here, segment 2. By the way, if you're listening to this as a podcast, it's always a podcast. You can listen to it in your show. We try to make it, we do some visual stuff that makes it a great watch along on our YouTube page. But if you ever miss it and you want to listen in the car ride, train ride, whatever you're doing, DNVR Nuggets podcast, the top-rated Nuggets podcast out there. And then you want also to note that this week, at least for 1 week, we're going to be on our alternate YouTube channel. Long story short, there's a mishap on Google's end, and it's so dumb. Like anytime that stuff happens, Google doesn't. Porn bots flooding the channel, right? Whatever. They make a mistake on what they think one of our links is, and then they lock us out of the channel for a week. So long story short, we're going to be on this alternate channel until we can get with YouTube to fix everything.
Shout out porn bots.
Sure, shout out the porn bots. The Nets. Last night, Sham Charania reports in a meeting with Nets owner Joe Tsai, Kevin Durant reiterated his trade request and informed Tsai that he needs to choose between Durant or the pairing of general manager Sean Marks and coach Steve Nash, sources say. And then he says, sources, Kevin Durant informed Joe Tsai that he does not have faith in the Nets' direction. The meeting was described as transparent and professional with a clear message. Keep me or the GM and coach. First of all, peeling back the curtain a little bit, the phrasing of this stuff is always hilarious to me. I'm told that the meeting was transparent and professional as he demanded that they fire his bosses.
As he kicked his feet up on the owner's desk and said, here's the deal, champ.
Like, what are we doing here, man? Like, this
joint.
is I wonder where this report came from. You know, like, I'm really curious where the report of a transparent and professional trade demand from a player who has been treated unfairly. It's just so ridiculous, man. So first of all, there's that report. No sooner. And I mean, like this, I know happened. I know you guys talked about it on the show yesterday, but it had just dropped. You guys were reacting immediately, but you weren't reacting to this. Joe Tsai, who has his own Twitter account, almost immediately, it was like an hour afterwards, comes out and says, our front office and coaching staff have my support. We will make decisions in the best interest of the Brooklyn Nets. Vote. Here's why. I don't care about all the drama that happens most of the time, how this stuff is getting talked about. But this one's interesting. Because Kevin Durant's a test subject, unlike LeBron James, who always has one-year deals. You know why he does that? So if this situation happens, he has all the leverage. Kevin Durant has 4 more years on his deal. No trade clauses, none of that stuff. The Nets could just say, you know what? We don't want to. This was not that enjoyable. We were a play-in team that got swept. Like, what are we doing here? Kevin Durant, yes, you're a great player, but we don't know. First of all, he's 34, I think, years old, 33 years old, 34. He might not be good for that much longer anyway. I mean, that's a weird gamble, but maybe. And by the way, we have Ben Simmons, who we're not exactly thrilled about. We have Kyrie, who we're not thrilled about. This just might have been a bad thing that we're going to cash in and start over. We're sending you to the Orlando Magic. Like, you don't have a choice. You want to go to a contender? Why don't you waste your years in Oklahoma City again or something like that? It's on the table. To me, this was meaningful. We'll see how it plays out. Nothing's that meaningful till it actually happens. But this was meaningful in... we've talked about this, we're kind of coming full circle on the player empowerment era where like they're starting to be, it's always a chess match. Players learn that they have power they never knew and they try to tap into it. And for a decade, they've kind of pressed their thumb on ownership in a lot of different ways. This is kind of a owner being like, F it.
Yeah.
You want to go to, you know what? F it. We can trade you.
I actually love this. And I think, remember when Brooklyn made both of those moves, initially the reaction is, well, you have to do this. You have to do this. 10 times out of 10. But maybe it's 9 times out of 10 because let's look at what happened. They cashed in a real culture, a real place where people wanted to show up and work and were having fun and were accountability themed to thrive for an absolute utter disaster.
Right.
For a player who wants them to bow to him.
Right.
When they haven't won anything yet. And I know how good Kevin Durant is, but maybe it's 9 times out of 10 because this is what that 10th time gets you. Like, Tsai can either cave and look utterly spineless,
right,
or he can play hardball with the best player in franchise history and possibly piss him off and or lose him. But
I feel like this represents that second part he no longer cares about. There's no satiating all sides here. Like, Kevin Durant's either going to stay with the Nets and be unhappy, or he's going to be traded. But there's no like kumbaya finale.
I like this. I feel like it was a spine check, and he's saying, "Hey, I've got one." It's just so you know, whether this works out for the best interest of the Nets or not. You do not own this team.
And at the very least, just positioning that, right? Like, at least saying that. And maybe he's really shaking in his boots right now. Sure. But at least he is positioning the, like, I'm not going to play this game. I'll just burn it all down before I, just fire everybody. Which, by the way, Steve Nash, not exactly like the world's greatest coach. And from all accounts, I don't think necessarily wants to even be the coach. But there's so much money offered to him. So it's kind of a funny thing to say, like, Are you really going to pick Steve Nash over Kevin Durant? Like, Kevin Durant's 1,000 times more important to your success, but I think it's more the principle of it. Same goes for Sean Marks.
Agreed.
So I think all of that stuff is a little bit interesting, and we'll have to see how it plays out. Now, I want to say one thing here. I hate the phrasing of labor versus capital when talking about players in the NBA, because I do not think it makes sense. This is not like a factory, right, where there's like workers or this or that. The labor in this instance are players, unionized players, who, by the way, are making an enormous amount of money. Owners are making even more money, so there's still that dynamic. What's always thought about is there's a third wheel of the labor capital dispute, which is the actual consumers. And more than this, like, one is pressing their thumb against the other, both are now in this like sort of equally powered or close to equally powered environment. And like, they're trying to work together. But what I think that what we're learning is, in the NBA ecosystem of this labor versus capital, one having absolute power over the other is actually a disaster that works terribly almost every single time.
Right.
Synergy is what's important. And I know this sounds so simple. It sounds like a platitude. But this is why I hated the phrasing of like, oh, well, then you just support the owners, or, oh, well, you just support the players. It's like, guys, these are coworkers, both of who have an enormous amount of power, and that environment is different than your typical office job environment where it's different.
A superstar sort of wanting to have their way in the NBA is hardly representative of the 1% in any sort of like economic struggle. So,
and also, of course, an even more important point that player empowerment is really just like superstar empowerment.
Right.
It's not actual player
Davon
empowerment.
Reed doesn't feel like he has a ton of power.
Very little few players have actually felt empowered. But nonetheless, my point is, the better way, instead of looking at it through like political lenses and like socioeconomic lenses, I think it's more important to look at it that the relationship between owner and player is so important. And I do contrast that to what Jamal Murray said about the whole organization has treated me like family and treated me this, and I want to be here for the rest of my life. To me, that's the right synergy. Now, we've seen players say that and then demand a trade a year later, so I'm not trying to go all in on the like, look at how perfect the Nuggets are.
Sure.
But I'm just saying it's more important, in my opinion, for them to say those two sides of the equation work together in synergy, and they have the fan in mind, the consumer, who's always forgotten, by the way, whenever we're doing these like pro-labor capital player empowerment debates. It's like,
right.
Well, this sucks for the people consuming it.
Yeah, they're often left out.
The millions of people are really left out of the equation.
I was talking about this on the radio this morning, and I think the term it's mutual respect. There needs to be that mutual respect between the best player and the organization.
Right.
And, some of the most infamous examples of a lack of that are two teams James Harden was on, like the Houston one, which just turned into just like James Harden World with a theme park.
If you have bad roommates every time, you might be the bad roommate. That's like James Harden. Like, what bad luck that he always ends up in a disaster.
And you got to get lucky, right? I mean, by all accounts, Steph and Jokic are guys who are like conducive
and
to
Giannis,
this. And Giannis is actually the best example. But again, you also need to. You can't just cave, I think.
Right.
There has to be some, and I would imagine that even Steph would acknowledge it's not just him walking in there and telling that organization what to do every day.
Right. So, right. The part of the story that we didn't talk about that I think is equally as interesting as the story itself is the fact that, I don't know if you were on ESPN.com yesterday, because as you know, as a content creator, August is a really rough month for NBA news and notes. So when a tiny morsel of news is thrown your way, you fight over it. You extend that tiny morsel into a week's worth of food. ESPN did not comment on this one yesterday. They didn't do it on their television shows. They didn't do it online or this or that. And you're thinking, hold on. One of the best players in the NBA in one of the biggest markets just demanded a trade, and then publicly the owner commented on that. Surely ESPN has something to say. This was the premise of Ethan Strauss's great article today. You guys know, follow the show, know I love Ethan Strauss's Substack. He talked about this very thing. How weird that this giant story happened and they did not even comment on it. I don't want to go way into it. I only highlight it, and Ethan does a great job of outlining it. If you're interested in these types of stories, the media and how they interact with the NBA, I highly recommend subscribing. What's interesting about these is we've shown he posits that Woj, who is a CAA client and who has everybody in his pocket, very close ties to the Nets organization,
right.
Very close ties to general manager Sean Marks. And this story, as sensitive as it may be, every story that goes through ESPN gets filtered to Woj of, can we talk about this? How should we talk about this? What have you? And over the last 5 years or so, really it's been 10, 15 years, but over the last 5 years, I feel like it swung so far that now when the biggest news story of the week in all of sports drops, ESPN can't even talk about it. The number one outlet for sports. We're in a bizarro world right now, and I don't think people fully realize what that's like.
He did. Woj didn't even tweet about it.
No tweets!
No tweets.
ESPN, when they finally tweeted about it, I think like late last night, the way they phrased it was Joe Tsai shows support of manager and coach. Like it didn't. Kevin Durant's the headline. Kevin Durant demands trade is the headline. Instead, it's like Joe Tsai. That's such a passive voice to tweet out the biggest story of the year.
And it does seem, I mean, this is assumptive. I don't know how they do their business, but from afar, like player or agent, you send your statement to Shams. He'll post it for you.
Right.
And with Woj, who's more like another team, another organization, who's just leveraging every
the most powerful organization.
Most powerful one. It's very bizarre. I think most people have some level of distinction between whatever it is that he does and journalism.
Except for his power extends beyond himself. That would be true if it was just Woj. But this is my point, Vogt.
Right.
We are in such a bizarre moment in time right now in media in general, but sports media in particular, that something like this can just not be reported by the single outlet that is most responsible for reporting on the NBA. And they're like, no, we can't touch this one until we get the clear. We're so far like over the hill on this stuff, and I don't think people quite realize it. And it makes you think like this whole league feels compromised to me.
I know. And yeah. How often is anyone really talking honestly, about the information? How did they come by it honestly? Are they talking about it honestly? Are they putting it out there just because they believe in the consumer entitlement to facts or for other reasons? And I think it's very clear it's often the latter. I take solace in the fact that it's sports, this
doesn't matter like that to that degree.
To some extent, in that it's like this isn't Washington. I don't know if like lives like are on the line or anything, but it doesn't mean it's great.
Right. I just think it's a big deal that I don't think everybody realizes that like ESPN refuses to comment on the single biggest story. Can you imagine if Jokic demanded a trade and we were just like doing a show and we're like, what are the top 5 goofiest jerseys?
And the flip side is if Woj greenlights that, then it leads First Take every single day that week.
Yeah. But well, we'll think about that when like some BS Nugget story is like leading. Everybody's tweeting about it, and you're like, well, Nuggets not protected from this shelter here? What's going on here? So bizarre. All right, let's get to our mailbag. Kale, if you pull up the docs, you can pull the tweets up. Do you need me to resend that?
Yes, please.
Yeah, just we bookmark this one here as I send it in production assignments here. First question up. This comes from Scott. Is there a world where the Nuggets win a playoff series in 5 or fewer games during Jokic's tenure, or are we just meant to suffer through 6 and 7 game series? It's a very good question. Vogt?
I think there's absolutely a world in which that happens. Does that
happen this year?
I think so.
Really?
I don't know if the seeding is going to be tough. What you're talking about is if they're a top 3 seed again, and this time they're ready to play.
Can you picture the sweep? Can you just picture it?
Not really.
Me neither. I can't picture it.
But I can see 5. Yeah. Like if they played that same Spurs team again, but now they have Porter and Gordon and they've learned these lessons. I know that team doesn't exist.
Right.
They're beating that team in 5.
That last part is the hard part, but we'll get to it later.
Oh, I see what you're saying. But I do think
because I'm with you. If they played the 2019 Spurs, I agree. It's 4 or 5.
I think they've learned a lot of these lessons.
Yeah. So I look back at it. If you go first one, as you mentioned, the Spurs, that was the Nuggets' first ever series. There's a learning curve to it. They did win game 2, and it felt a little bit lucky, so they could have been down 0-2, and then, they lost game 3. After that, they win games 4 and 5, and it felt like they got over the hump.
They figured it out.
But there's another learning curve I don't know that all players tell you, and that is the hardest game to win is the closeout game. And I think the Nuggets figured the Spurs out a little bit over games 2 and 3. Games 4 and 5, exercise their will. Okay, here we go. We're over it. Game 6 was the closeout game, and they're like, okay, it's a regular game. This is how it goes. Nope, they get smacked. If you remember, Jokic was ready for it. He was up for it. His best game to that point came in game 6. But I think the rest of the Nuggets didn't realize that the desperate team usually wins, and they were going up against the most desperate team they've ever faced to that point. The Blazers won. Again, like the Nuggets, that they were so young, I'm not sure how great they were. So to expect them to win prior to 7 games, which they ended up losing, I don't know. You can go back and forth. I think game 2 was a bad game. They win game 1. Game 2 was a bad one. They lost game 3 in quadruple overtime. And to me, that's the pivot. Like you win that one, you win that series in 5 or 6 games and you're in the conference finals, and we look at it differently. Instead, 4 overtimes, a couple bad bounces, and that series goes 7 and they lose.
The other thing about that series is the Blazers at that point were so established as a team that had gone through things together, knew who they were.
I think they were in the conference finals the year before. A little bit of a fluke, easy route to get there, but nonetheless.
So, right. And then there's that Houston series back in there. Like, they just had gone through some things together that the Nuggets were still learning. And I thought Denver was the better team, but still learning how to execute in the playoffs, which is the name of the game.
Then the other one in that series that's interesting to look back on was game 6. If you remember, the Juancho shimmy in the corner was game 5, where it felt like the Nuggets were over a hump, and it's like, okay, they're going to put this team to sleep in game 6. It's 3-2. They're rolling. They got it. But again, I think one thing you have to go through to learn is that series don't always have the momentum you expect. Like, oh, we figured this team out. We won 2 in a row.
Right.
We're at home, and we're putting it on them so much that Juancho can dance. Game 6 is the closeout. It'll be tough, but whatever. It's like, no. It changes on a dime, and it changed in game 6. They didn't get that one done, and then game 7 became a coin flip that came up tails. Then, of course, the bubble one, whatever. Blazers, 6 felt like the right amount the second time they played them.
Yeah.
Because they were so shorthanded. I mean, Facu was starting.
Yeah.
Like, come on, guys. The one thing I will say is that series could have maybe been 5 if there wasn't a protest in the lobby of their hotel room in game 3, if you remember that one. Like, absolutely ridiculous. So maybe that one. So my answer is I agree. I think there is a good chance that the Nuggets, their long series, is somewhat inflated, in part by the fact that they haven't had a great team.
Yes.
In any, over these last couple of years.
I think if they run into like a 6 or 7 seed again, I think 5's on the table.
It is important though, because I've asked this question before and I never have seen it reported, or I don't even know how I would be able to research this without taking a year to do it. But how many teams have won a championship without a sweep or without a 5-game series? Like, it's almost essential, I would guess, that you get through the first and sometimes second rounds easily, because you have to have some energy. It's hard to get through 4 series. So Denver this year, hopefully they have a sweep in them somewhere. Jared Kimber asks, we know there was a little problem in MPJ's game before, like his weak hands on catching the ball. Is that something he could have worked on during his hiatus? We know he could watch tape and walkthroughs. What else could he have improved this time away? This is a good question. This question was specifically about his hand strength, but I think he was really asking more in general about what weaknesses could he address.
Yeah.
You want to take this one first?
Well, I've always been very curious about, and I know you've even asked Michael Porter Jr. about this, how a player improves defensively in the offseason.
He did not have a good answer.
Yeah. I wonder if that's a hard thing to do away from the team, unless...
I don't know how you improve defense, to be honest, in the offseason. I think it's very, very difficult to.
You could watch film and
you guard good players.
Tendencies, but
how many good players are there that are not in the NBA, and how do you get a good NBA player to play one-on-one with so you work on your own ball defense?
Yeah, I think that's a tough one, and it's not one I think those are ones where you see improvement when he plays in-game reps. So, but the other stuff, the hands, strength, absolutely. The footwork.
He looks good. He looks strong.
Footwork is a big one for me too. He's such a naturally talented shooter, and he wants to start shooting off movement more. But I think sometimes because he's so good, it can get a little lazy down low. Like, he could do more work to set his feet, I think, more carefully, more aggressively, sprinting into screens instead of just kind of, sometimes he takes those long, kind of aloof strides. So I think there are little things he can tighten up, absolutely. Not worried about the jump shot.
Jumper looks good. Although, you know what? Why not? Maybe he's a 50% three-point shooter, the first ever.
Right.
Like, honestly, it's on the table for him. His handle, of course, is a big thing. Body strength you talked about. To me, if I were his trainer, and he's got a good trainer, by the way, but if I were his trainer, I've always said I think Michael Porter is a receiver, not a running back, meaning the ball in his hands. Like, a lot of stuff you do in the offseason, work on handle, work on moves. Stuff is great. Got to work on that. Maybe he becomes more of a running back, whatever. But to me, I would be trying to work on specific reads in a continuity offense and shooting off of those reads. Like, I would go through whole practices where he never dribbles. And it's like, hey, the whole point of today's practice is you're not going to dribble, but we're going to run this action. You need to read this. You need to read that. And you just need to be able to be quick enough so you always know, like a wide receiver, how to get to the spot you're supposed to be in to get a quick shot off. So reading the court to me would be the number one thing. And I would go through the entire Nuggets playbook. What actions are you coming off of? Like, is it a pin down here? Is it a double pin down? Are you reading this slip? Where is it that you're going to be catching the ball? And let's work on those specific actions and reads so that when training camp comes around, it's like, wow, Michael Porter's grasping all of this super, super quickly.
That would be awesome. I would imagine it was probably more about handle and dribble moves, but
it's the easiest stuff to work on. Honestly, you add a couple moves and then it's like, all right, look what we did. And then you never use it in a game or almost never use it. So we'll see. Jesse Hartman asks, there's new personnel on the defensive side of the court. How do you think this will affect the defensive schemes the Nuggets might employ?
Well, the only thing is, just with more adept screen navigators, you're probably more comfortable in dropping Jokic sometimes than you have been in the past. I don't know. I mean, it's the whole, you're more comfortable with all of it. I don't know if it's necessarily about a fundamental change to the way they play defense so much as just guys that are better at it.
I don't know that there's a whole lot you can do defensively with Jokic. I mean, the one thing you can say about him defensively is he's not versatile. You're not going to switch everything. You're not, and I don't think you're going to have him deep drop or play any of that type of rim protection. I think Denver's scheme is going to have him either be trapping up at the level of the screen, and then the details of that. Whenever people talk about, oh, they're going to play at the level, there's whether you play right hip to hip with the screener, whether you play in front of the hip, whether you play behind it, those subtle differences matter, and we all call it the same coverage. He's playing at the level. Right. Those little details matter, so maybe they experiment with little pieces there. But I think for the most part, you got it what you're talking about here, which is it's more about the Nuggets. They now have better players to run the one scheme that they're going to be able to be good at. And they have guys that navigate screens better, that cover for you better. The one thing I will say is what's exciting about Bruce Brown is you now have lineup combinations that you could put out that are specifically designed to be good in the areas you're supposed to be, at least in the perimeter. And then secondly, in the games where you don't have a front court assignment for Aaron Gordon, the number one improvement the Nuggets defensively can make this year is if Aaron Gordon becomes more like Paul Millsap as a backside defender. I think he's a better on-ball defender than Paul Millsap, but he's a much worse backside guy. And this would be the year where it's like, hey, we've got great perimeter containment. Right. We need you to be the Draymond Green, the Paul Millsap, and play that backside a little bit better. And we have the personnel that you – last year – you don't have a good front court player? We're going to move Aaron Gordon to a back court player. Now he's guarding that guy. This year, there'll be none of that. There will be nights when it's like, hey, they don't have a great scorer at the 3 or the 4, so you need to be a help defender that makes the scheme really hum.
You want to quick ad break here?
Let's take a break. On the other side, we're going to rapid fire some more great questions.
Ivaka TV. They actually dropped us a question. I don't know if you saw that, Adam. They dropped us a mailbag question.
I saw that.
How can we watch Nuggets and Avs on our TV? We know the answer.
We know the answer.
It's with Ivaka TV, the new GOAT in Colorado sports. The greatest of all TV. Ivaka TV delivers amped up sports coverage for you, the Colorado sports fans. Just bypass the little billionaire slap fight this year. Just don't make it a part of your life. How about the lowest price for sports in Colorado, all in crystal clear HD while using less bandwidth? Ivaka TV has altitude. It has AT&T. You got everything you need to watch your favorite teams. And right now, Colorado sports fans can get $10 off per month the first 3 months. Just score this deal. Go to ivaka.tv/Colorado10. That's ivaka.tv/Colorado10. And just like that, you can watch your favorite local teams again. I personally think that's your right as a tax-paying Denverite or Coloradan. So tap in to Ivaka. They're changing the game. Speaking of changing the game, how about the leader in sports merchandise and collectibles? FOCO, your home for Denver sports coverage. That's us. Well, we're partnering with the leaders, and that's them. We want you to know that FOCO has officially licensed collectibles and gear, including the Nuggets back-to-back MVP Nikola Jokic bobblehead. Find your fandom with that or with FOCO's other officially licensed Nuggets gear. Check out their gear and merch for other Denver sports teams, including the new Rocky City Connect bobbleheads and more. Head on over to FOCO.com. Click the link below the YouTube description for all non-presale items. Use the promo code DNVR for 10% off.
All right, back here, segment 3, and you can see up on the screen, super producer Kale has our special limited edition shirt that is a fundraiser for our trip to Serbia. As we've mentioned many times, this is a huge undertaking. Nobody else in the world, no matter what the outlet, is sending a group of people abroad to better connect with the culture and history of the country of their best player. We're doing that very thing, and we're very excited for it, but it's an enormous undertaking. Luckily, we have a genius in Eric Weedham, who you guys know as D-Line Co., who put together this beautiful shirt. So please do us a favor. Buy this gorgeous shirt and wear it to the bar. You wear it to the bar, I'll be like, you know who you are? A real one. Supporting the homies as we go out for our trip.
In that bright
we will
red shirt.
definitely not miss you in that gorgeous red shirt. All right, segment 3, and we got a lot more great questions to get to. A reminder again, guys, we're going to be on our alternate channel this week, DNVR 2 on YouTube, as we sort through a couple issues. We might have a few issues with the website as well. So be sure to hit subscribe to this new one and turn alerts on so you never miss one of our shows. Hopefully within 1 week, we'll be back to the old channel. Zeke Van Dahy says, would you rather never have a post-game interview from Jokic again or only be able to interview Jokic and no other Nuggets? Similarly, if you had to choose one current Nugget to be the only post-game interviewee, who would it be and who would you choose? All right, so vote first one. Would you rather have Jokic only or never Jokic?
Probably never Jokic.
I
know that sounds blasphemous. It's a rare day that you feel like, wow, that was a particularly great, insightful media session.
I know, but when he does have them, they're so good.
I know. And it's the one that everyone wants. At the same time, if we only did Jokic interviews, we would never have any segment 3s. Be like, yeah, he shrugged his shoulders again today, and he said it was a good win.
This is the thing, is Jokic has to talk almost every game, as all-star players do.
Right.
And he's not the type that gives you great stuff every time, but he does give you great stuff.
When it's good, it's great.
When it's good, it's really, really good. But you're right. If you had to talk to him every day and only him, there would be games where you're like, I don't know what the team feels about the game right now.
Jokic seems unconcerned, but everyone else looked upset. I don't know.
The same token, he is the most important Nugget, and generally speaking, he's the one who's the most insightful about what's going on. He doesn't always share that.
This is true.
But it is like, if you never talk to him, you would feel like you don't really know what's going on with the team. Nonetheless, I'm with you. I would have to take everyone else for that. But then the second part of this is so hard. If you could only choose one Nugget, who would you choose? The Nuggets are probably in the bottom 10 in terms of good quotes post-game.
It's always been that way.
It really has. They haven't had... I mean, Will Barton was by far... If he was still on the team, it'd be him.
Jamal, I don't know if he's there yet. Bones is more energy and hype than insight by a lot.
1,000%. It's like the dessert. It's like the ice cream.
Right.
If you had that for your meal every day, I think you would...
That's a great point.
Eventually be like, I don't get any nutrients here.
I think that's exactly it. When Jamal decides he's in the mood for it, it's good.
Jamal is my answer, and this is funny. I'm hoping for a big season from Jamal in the court. Hoping for a big season from Jamal in the media. I'm so curious.
We haven't heard from him in a long time.
He can be contentious at times. He can ask he can go at a reporter thinking there's an ulterior motive when me personally, I don't think that there is one. So, but it would be him. I'm hopeful. Did I just break DraftKings?
Yeah, dude. On the air.
Sorry. So I think I would pick Jamal. Pastorette says, what is your dream path to the title run? I'd say Minnesota, Phoenix, Golden State, Philly. What would be... Well, he asked a bunch of different ones, but let's just ask your personal favorite. Let's start with this. Let's go in reverse order, because I think for me it was easier to go that. Who would you rather beat from the Eastern Conference? Like the best story.
Celtics.
You're free.
The only argument against that is that means they made the finals.
Yeah, but it would be pretty great. You're right. Celtics would be pretty good. So you went straight for the just like you want to see the collapse, even more so than the 76ers?
I think it's way funnier if the Sixers just never make the finals.
I agree.
Just never even get
even the conference finals would be kind of funny.
Yeah.
There's a real part of me that everyone again, this happens. The season ends, Jokic MVP, people are like, he's great. 2 months later, who's in your top 5? Not Jokic. Nobody has him, but Joel Embiid. It'd be fun if he was just considered a top 5 player for a decade and never made the conference finals. It'd be pretty funny.
I want to know who's willing to rank Jason Tatum ahead of Jokic in terms of best players under 30 after the Nuggets beat them.
Oh, that would be a great one. All right, so in the conference final, mine was Bucks. So there's two different perspectives here.
That's wholesome.
It's wholesome. I want Giannis and Jokic to dominate the NBA for the next decade. So I just want them both to be there and everyone else have to. I just want to watch every pundit eat their vegetables on national television. Brian Windhorst is up there being forced to talk about Giannis and Jokic.
Athletic greens.
All right, conference finals.
Clippers.
You have a thing for the Clippers. I was on the show yesterday. You guys had them in your top 5. To me, they're just a team that's out there. They're good.
I think Yeah, I mean, I think they could end up as the odds-on favorites to win the title by the time the playoffs come around.
Could see it.
As they were the last time the Nuggets beat them in the playoffs. Just wonder if there's something here. And then two teams coming back from injury to all of a sudden maybe being the most complete rosters in the West.
That's good.
It would feel to me, the Warriors almost feel like at this point, if you catch them, like, congrats, you caught them on the tail end or whatever. But, like,
you think?
I don't think there's any getting over whatever
right.
the Warriors have done. Like, there's the Nuggets missed that wave.
All right.
But beating the Clippers to having next would feel good.
All right. First and second rounds?
Sun's got to be in there, right?
Just get revenge. Is there? And then what's the other one?
The Lakers.
The Lakers make the playoffs. Maybe it'll happen. I went Bucks. I do think you have to have a Warriors. Like I think there's something to who the Pistons had to get over the hump. Then the Bulls had to get over a hump. I just like this idea of creates a better narrative if you're like, you know what? And finally, the Warriors were finally upended. And who was it? The next dynasty.
Right.
What just happened with the Avs?
Right.
Lightning going for a three-peat. That's the dynasty. You have to beat them. You would have to go the hard route to get them. So I like that. Suns for revenge, and then I have them with you, Lakers. So we had two of the same. Oh my Jesus, or oh my Jesus. He says, how would you rank the Nuggets in a pure hooper tier list? I think what he's asking here is who's the pure hoopers, who are the basketball players. Wins. This is a question for Harrison Wind, really.
I know. Should we stash it?
No, I think we can just go into it real quick.
You.
All right, who's on the basketball end of the spectrum? And who's the furthest on the basketball end? Come on, it's the easiest one.
Jokic.
Yeah, Jokic is the ultimate basketball player. That's why Hoopers don't like him.
I mean, Zeke Naji's just absolute value. Zeke Naji has a chance.
That's true. Then who else do you have?
Bruce Brown. What do you think of Aaron Gordon?
He's more of a basketball. I think he's a shocking basketball player.
Yeah.
Because he dunks, so you think like, okay, but I think he's a basketball player.
I think he was a better player if he leans into basketball player than Hooper.
Okay.
And so
I definitely don't love his crossover he does that doesn't go anywhere.
That's what I mean. Yeah. I think he does though. KCP.
Yeah.
Basketball player. Jeff Green.
Every now and then he colors outside the line, so yeah, he's lower on it. Jeff Green, interesting one. Here's the thing. Jeff Green has Hooper talent but plays like a basketball player.
I know, that's really well said.
The Hooper side. Who's the number one hooper on the Nuggets? Now, here's what's interesting. Again, it's more of the scale of this. Not necessarily like who's the best hooper, but who is more of a hooper than a basketball player. This is what makes it hard.
It does what makes I'm still going to go Porter one.
I think so, too. And I think most people would say Bones. But here's the thing. Bones has a lot of basketball player traits.
He does.
If he wants to go to be full hooper in a pro-am, he can be full hooper. But if you actually get him on the court,
he can play point guard.
He can play point guard and distribute. Whereas Michael Porter, I think, is at his best when he's just like getting shots up, man.
I think, and this isn't necessarily a good thing, but you watch his workout videos and go, "Oh yeah, that's like what he's going to play like."
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Doesn't matter what court he's on. So I would say it's those two for sure. Jamal is a hooper.
Jamal is a hooper with basketball tendencies, but he's at his best doing like 4 jittery crossovers.
But he does set like gnarly screens in his footwork. His
he's like so fundamental. You're right. He's right in the middle, man. He's he's the best blend, actually.
I was surprised. I'm looking at your list here, and I'm surprised about this one. Davon Reed.
I just don't. This was more of a not basketball player than a pro hooper. I just don't know that he is. I don't think he's Kenny Hustle. You know what I mean? Like when you think of these type of guys, these role players, you think of them as like, okay, are they going to be extra smart, extra like crafty and savvy? And I'm like, I don't know. I kind of feel like his best moments were when he was taking crazy shots and making them.
He was a much better scorer and less reliable guy than I thought. Yeah.
Ludio Black. I don't know what this is. He says, what part of the game do you expect Jokic to improve this season the most? That's a good question. Yeah, you guys start making your own list.
Yeah, they're all up here, boss. We've said leadership for 2 seasons in a row now, so I don't want to say that.
All right, well, I think you're wrong. And I'm going to tell you, Voya just had an interview with Ogi Stojakovic, one of the Nuggets coaches, but it was in Serbian. But he sent me a couple of the highlights, and allegedly he's going to transcribe it. Here's Voya. We're waiting on it. But he says,
Voya.
Come on, Voya, what the heck, dude? But he said that one of the things he talked about, and he was asked this very question, where has he improved most? And he's like, as a leader. And what he said was, especially in film sessions, he's like speaking out in film, like leading film sessions now more with the team and stuff like this. So I think you almost dismissed the leadership part of it. I think, as is the case with all things Jokic does, he just doesn't ever advertise it.
Right. Sure. We may not get glimpses into it, but the improvements there.
And we view leadership as like somebody shooting free throws and he calls a huddle in and gives an impassioned speech. And like,
Right.
I think it just manifests in different ways. But I'm still with you. It's still a process of becoming the best leader, which he has ways to go still.
I think there's still room to grow conditioning defensively, but those are like, I don't hold my breath necessarily. And he has made great strides. I actually still think he can cut the turnovers down a bit.
Man,
I know they're kind of a symptom of the same thing that makes him amazing and who he is.
it'd be interesting to see if his turnovers go down this year by a meaningful amount.
Just for more of like, is everything a bit more Bisman-like, workman-like? There's a job to do this year and a little less. There was so much freedom to approach it however he wanted. So it's something I'm curious about.
So one thing that happened, and maybe I'll do a video on this when we do our season previews. One thing that happened, and Malone actually, or there were people that have actually even talked about it. I can't remember if it was Malone or somebody else. But at the end of the year, I mean, all season long, Jokic started catching the ball on the move more.
Yeah.
Like, if you really think about tangible differences in his game, one of them was he would come off of pin downs last year, regularly. He would cut across the court, catch on the move, one dribble, and do something with it. And it was a new part of his game. He's always been a versatile inside-outside guy, but it's mostly been stationary. Okay, I'm going to operate from here. He added that, and I'm thinking of the Pelicans game in particular. Mm-hmm. If you remember, it was the Pelicans game. He has this play where at the end, like in overtime, where he tries to do something, it doesn't work. He passes the ball back, it gets stuck, and it's like at the end of, and he V-cuts. He cuts to the block and then cuts back out to the 3-point line, catches it, and shoots. And I think that it's one of those plays that you don't think about because you're just so hyped in the moment and how cool everything was. Plays like that, even for him, are new.
Right.
Those are even more versatile. And I think if we see that part of his game, the ability to run him off V-cuts and stuff like that, even when you have all your pieces back, there's a whole new level to be unlocked to the Nuggets offense in whole when you're not running that stuff because you need it in desperation in overtime, but when you can just run that just because it's like, hey, this is hard to guard.
I thought that was a big part of his MVP ascension, even 2 years ago, was just starting to see hit, because defenses had to commit everything to figuring out some way to slow him once everything was set and he had position. And then he was figuring out the last thing they're expecting is me to just get position. He had that great quote too, where he's like, he doesn't think he is so slow that when he does accelerate, it has the same effect. Right. You can see that when he moves off ball, it's like the last thing anyone's expecting. Right. And it almost like he shot out of a cannon.
Tom Hess says, any ball handling concerns with the departures of Monte and Will Barton? I think absolutely. It's one of my top concerns. If Bones Highland is healthy all year, if Jamal Murray is healthy all year, those concerns are a lot smaller. But there's not a lot of great secondary ball handler. In fact, if you ask who are the best in the starting lineup, who's the best secondary ball handler, it's way closer between KCP and AG than it was Barton and AG.
Yeah.
It's way closer.
I agree with that.
So you already have one, a little bit weaker there. And then when you talk about in the second unit, secondary ball handler, Bruce Brown.
I think it's Bruce
Jeff Green, maybe. Like those are the guys, and they're not great secondary ball handlers, in my opinion.
I know the Nuggets view Bruce as a guy who could, he plays every position, played point guard in the past, and in a pinch he could. But I don't think that's ideal. And here's the thing about Bones. When we talk about injuries right now, I think we all think of the big, really damning stuff. But it's the little things too. Bones tweaked both ankles last season,
right.
And if just for those little stretches, who is that backup ball handler? And it was one thing about Will that was underappreciated. He could just run a pick and roll, and fewer players on this roster can.
One thing about this year's offseason, and I do think it was great, and I do think there was a sense of you have to get Will out of there because the role for him has expired a little bit.
Right.
But part of me wonders if you could have traded Monte for KCP. And you still had Will Barton and your second unit, but it was like, hey, Will, KCP's the starter. You're the bench guy. Just know that. Deal with it and let's move on. If you had a bench right now that was Bones, Barton, Bruce, instead of Bones, Davon, or Brown and Bruce, to me, I think I would feel better about it because you have an extra ball handler. As much as say what you will about Will Barton and where does he fit into all of this, he probably wouldn't close very many games at all. At least that would be your plan. He would just be a bench guy, and Bones, Barton, Bruce, to me, would have been a very good 1-2-3. Again, maybe was never on the table, but to me, in hindsight, I don't think you wanted to get rid of Will Barton as much as you just needed him to be in the role that was best for him, and maybe that was impossible.
Right. And
a la Boogie Cousins.
I think that's what it is. But you think back to the Nuggets, just lacking dynamicism without their guys in clutch time. And can anyone else initiate any action?
Right.
And it felt scarce, as it were, in terms of options. And, let's say it's tonight where Jamal's taking a night off or Bones can't play. It will feel even worse. Like, there's a lot of guys that can do a lot of stuff, but fewer than you might think that can run a pick and roll or penetrate a defense.
Jordan Scott asks, what is going to be the biggest hurdle for the Nuggets this year? There's a couple different options. I listed them out here. Number one is health. Everything with the Nuggets, the caveat is if healthy. And so number one to me, the biggest variable is clearly health. They, less so than probably any other team in the league outside of maybe the Clippers, health is just a real X factor for them. So that's number one. Number two, the West is loaded. We just talked about if you caught the 2019 Spurs, the Nuggets would sweep. There is no 2019 Spurs that are the 8 seed anymore. I don't believe that. The 8 seed this year is going to be a good team. It might be the Lakers.
Right.
The 8 seed is going to be a very good team that is really, really tough. And so just the fact that it might turn into a war of attrition, even in the playoffs where nobody gets to have an easy 4 rounds, all 4 rounds are tough. To me, that's unique to this era, and I think it's almost underrated. Next on the list for me, chemistry with Michael Porter. I think part of the reason people don't know what to do with Michael Porter outside of the health concerns for him are just that we've never felt like he fully unlocked all of it. And then even if you go back to some of these series, Michael Porter created a complication in that bubble series with the Utah Jazz. As good as he was,
right,
the defense was below a threshold, and the offense wasn't making up for it because the chemistry wasn't quite there. To me, Michael Porter being a closer for this team in the playoffs is the best scenario. Bruce Brown's there in case that can't happen. If it just doesn't work they're getting targeted and you can't get any stops. Bruce Brown is a solve there. But the better solve is if Michael Porter isn't that guy, and either his defense improves wildly, tough to bet on, but who knows, or his offense fully clicks so that offense is just humming and there is no awkwardness. There is he fits seamlessly in the way that Klay Thompson fits alongside Steph Curry, and it's you guys are going to score on us for a while, but you're going to get so discouraged when you miss 2 shots in a row and we hit 2 threes in a row. Your will is going to get broken.
When those Porter quarters feel less like exceptions or outliers and more like part of
Klay Thompson.
That's exactly it.
Jamal Murray, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Michael Porter. And it's just you feel like you did everything right, but it didn't matter. He hit 4 in a row.
And Porter at this stages in their respective careers far more dynamic and talented, but a long ways back in that second half of it, which is a big part of it. Can it, as opposed to, and by the way, as a bonus, there's Porter. Can it become more of Porter is a part of what makes them so deadly?
Depth of ball handling players, as we just discussed, is definitely a part of this. The bench in general, I think, is part of this. Camaraderie, the fact that this team is largely new players that don't know each other. I mean, this is the most different sort of lineup we've had.
It's basically like the Brooklyn Nets traded star players. The Brooklyn Nets role players traded their cast of star players.
Yeah.
And now they're in Denver.
And then we've got backup center position is a small one, and then Bones. I've talked about this a lot. The team relies on him so much. Is he ready for it? We'll find out. Edmund Apathy asks, what would an all-in move look like at the trade deadline? I just wanted to address this one because we've talked a lot about the Nuggets might make a big move. To me, if Michael Porter has a killer 4 months, so good that teams are looking at him and being like, hey, man, he's worth the gamble on health. And Denver has an opportunity to trade him for a Mikal Bridges, not that exact player. I'm just saying a type of guy that's hey, he's not as good, but he definitely, in a playoff series, has no weaknesses.
Get this right.
And we're going to get it. That to me would be the type of could be an all-in move where you trade potential that is unproven in a playoff setting for OG Anunoby we know is going to guard. Your defense is going to be great. Your ceilings will be lower, but we feel like you're more prepared now for whatever it is a team can throw at you. To me, that would be an all-in move. And again, maybe the all-in move is not doing that. Porter looks so good, it's going to be really hard. If he's averaging 25 a game, 24 a game, and he's played in most of the games, it's going to be awfully hard to say, hey, we need less of that awesome stuff. And then the other one to me would be, they have, I think, 1 pick that they can trade. I can't remember. It's not a lot. There's some other things I think they could do to make a second one available. Zeke Naji, Bruce Brown, maybe even a Peyton Watson. So all of your future, you trade those guys for a role player. a Harrison Barnes, like a move that's not sexy. And you're like, hold on, you just traded Zeke and Brown. Maybe you even trade. I don't think you would trade Bones Highland because I think he represents part of like a necessity for your roster. But if you traded all the other assets, picks, Christian Brown, Zeke Najee, Peyton Watson, Ishmael Kamagate, whatever it is, all of your future, and it was like, yes, but we got a good role player who's unsexy, but we think he's a piece that's going to win now.
Vibe with all that. Zeke was the first place I went with this in my head. Even just a smaller, if it turns out the backup center thing is a real problem and it's something you want to address, maybe you lose value. Maybe you lose a trade in terms of turning a guy like Zeke into a backup center. It's not the sexiest thing, but that leads me to my answer to this question, which is, for the most part, the Nuggets are there. There's some of these moves they can make, but I have always viewed the Aaron Gordon trade as that all-in trade. And I think while it's not a perfect roster, it is a roster that's set up to go and try to win a title this year. And so it's not really about, well, we still need that star or we need that third option. It's more about, do you do some reshuffling in terms of filling roles?
Two last ones here. We'll kind of race through. We went a little bit long today. Bill Zine says, if the Nuggets did a one-on-one tournament, what would the final podium be? I'll just answer that first part. To me, the order is Jamal Murray, number one. First of all, Yoke has to be out of it. There was a video, did you see not too long ago, somebody posted of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar playing one-on-one against Dr. J, and Kareem just murdered him.
Yeah,
and like, he's just so big and this or that. And that's the thing is, like, with Yoke, if Yoke played one-on-one with Jamal Murray, it'd be very boring. He's too big, and he would just back him all the way down and then score. So let's take Jokic and even DeAndre Jordan out of this. Not that he really factors in, but let's just take him out. Everybody else, the size is close enough, okay? I think it goes Jamal number one, Michael Porter number two. Michael Porter, by the way, super underrated one-on-one player. He grew up playing ones. Like, this is what he does. And he's so tall.
He doesn't have to dribble.
I think it's underrated, but I think Jamal a little bit better. And then Bones is number three. Bones a great one-on-one player, but I don't think he's getting any stops. Like, he's not stopping Jamal, and I don't think he's really contesting Porter in a meaningful way. So to me, I had to put him three. Everybody else doesn't really matter.
I agree with that.
That order? Okay.
I agree with that.
Last one from Meg Starling, my favorite question.
Here we go.
How can the Nuggets rehearse? She knows I love the rehearsal. Such a big fan. How can the Nuggets rehearse playing in the finals? Will this give them the best chance of winning? And what team would they rehearse against? So I took this question a little seriously here.
I knew you would.
Nathan Fielder was hired by Calvin Booth to come over and be like, the goal is to get the Nuggets to be prepared to win a championship this season. In training camp, he's in there and he orchestrates how this works. I think I would constantly thrust Jokic into high-pressure situations that require leadership. You manufacture some things in training camp that no one can foresee. A fight breaks out amongst two teammates. And
for these possessions, there's no referee.
No referee. He's just going to get fouled on stuff. Or here's a better one. You get the whole team together without Jokic, and you say, hey, guys, all practice, you're just going to shoot every time you touch the ball. No passes, don't run the plays no matter what happens. And let's just see how Jokic responds. That's how I would, if I were Nathan Fielder, that's how I would do it. Nobody run the plays, just shoot. And let's see if Jokic, how does he handle it?
I would also put Malone through a series of stress tests, but he has no timeouts available. And if he accidentally uses one, he gets shocked a little bit.
I like that. I like that one of like, you keep doing these scenarios where he has to, you simulate scrimmages where the team just sucks for the first 6 minutes.
Porter blows the rotation. Go.
Go. Like, what are you going to do? Are you going to call timeout? Are you going to call like, no?
You want to.
You got to save that
timeout, boy.
I also like a scenario where Michael Malone has to play rookies only. Like, you have a game and it's just like, look, you got to play Christian Brown, man. I know he's not your vet, but you just have to.
And I think you got to bring Chris Paul in. And you just run pick and rolls until Denver gets it right one time. Just one time.
Bring Chris Paul in. I like it. You simulate these situations where you could either go to a vet who clearly doesn't have it or a rookie player, and you just like keep putting him in until he gets it right.
You have to.
You have to.
And then Jeff, make sure you sit real close to Michael and look him in the eyes every time something goes wrong.
These are the ways I think the Nuggets can best simulate the season to get it right. Maybe Jamal Murray, you simulate before the game. you come by scenario where the team is tricked into thinking you're down.
You're down 3-1.
Yeah, you're down 3-1. Like, hey, man, I know it looks, the scoreboard up there says 0-0 and the game's just starting, but actually you're down 10 and there's only 8 minutes left.
We created an entire recreation of the bubble environment.
That's it. A full-scale replica of the bubble outside of Ball Arena. It's like surrounding Ball Arena. That's exactly how you do it. This is perfect. All right, that does it, guys. That was a fun one, dude. Two-man game, man. If you guys enjoyed this one, hit that like button, but also support us on this trip, guys. Buy that t-shirt for us. It's going to be a great t-shirt first and foremost. And then every time you come to the bar, you're going to get like the biggest high five from me because that'll mean so much to me that you guys support us. We got some great interviews lined up for that trip. We have some great events. Apparently it's Beer Fest when we get out there, so we're going to go right into a giant festival almost immediately. We got some really cool stuff lined up. Some really cool people we're talking to, both famous people, but also not famous people that are also going to be great to talk to. So I'm just excited for all of this, and we hope that you guys feel along with us for this ride. Like, we have two goals: one, an extended giant documentary of the trip, which we hope to release right before the start of the season, and then the other, just everyday content, so you guys feel like you're traveling along with us on the flight. Maybe not on the flight the whole way, but you get a little sense of what it's like to be in our wheelhouse during those moments.
You're coming with us. You're all packing into my iPhone, and we're live streaming this.
So if you guys want to support us, you can get in touch with us, or you can, of course, just buy this t-shirt. Hit that like button on the way out.